Molly. Welcome back to another chapter book readings with Molly. Today we're going to read another section of Fortunately the Milk by Neil Gaiman. If you remember where we left off last time, it's the children's father. He has found this group of jungle people who have told him about this crazy prophecy that involves milk, and they're getting ready to go up to this volcano. So we're going to just continue where we left off. So it must have been either Splod himself talking or one of his angelic messengers. We walked together down a jungle path. Professor Steg carried the rope in his mouth that led up to the balloon, and he dragged the balloon along. After half an hour, we reached the volcano. It was not a very big volcano. There were wisps of smoke coming from the top of it. On the side of the volcano, there was a carving of a big, scary face with one eye in the middle of its forehead. The eye was the biggest emerald I had ever seen. "A special shiny greeny stone," said Professor Steg with his mouth full of rope. The fat man clambered up the side of the volcano. "It is a good thing that Splod himself told us to give you the Eye of Splod," said the little thin man who had narrowly avoided being sacrificed. And here's an illustration, by the way, of some of these wild-looking characters. "Because there is another prophecy that in the eye of Splod is ever removed, great Splod will awaken and spread burning destruction across the land." "Here you go," said the fat man. He handed us the emerald. Professor Steg nipped up the rope ladder into the balloon's gondola and began to install the emerald in the time machine. "Hang on, he was a stegosaurus?" This is one of the kids. "Yes." And here's an illustration. Looks like a face in the mountain. "Then how could he just nip up a rope ladder?" "He was," said my father, "a large stegosaurus, but very light on his feet. There are fat people who are excellent dancers." "Are there any ponies in this?" asked my sister. "I thought there would be ponies by now." Another illustration. I was standing on the ground, holding onto the rope ladder, when the ground shook and the very small volcano began to belch smoke and lava. "Splod is angry," shouted the little thin man. "He wants his eye back." There was a rushing wind, and the balloon jerked me up into the air, high above the splurting lava. Unfortunately, I dropped the milk. I wasn't holding on to it tightly enough. It landed on the top of Splod's head. Professor Steg hauled the rope ladder up with his tail. "I've lost the milk," I told him. "That's not good," he admitted. "But I know where it is. It's on top of Splod's head, on the side of the volcano." Professor Steg said, "Good Splod! What on earth is that?" Before our eyes, another balloon just like ours appeared over the volcano. A man hurried down the rope ladder. He placed a large emerald in Splod's eye, picked up the milk from Splod's head, ran up the ladder, and the balloon vanished. The very small volcano stopped erupting as suddenly as if it had been turned off. "That was a bit peculiar, wasn't it?" said the professor. "It was," I agreed, gloom and despair and despondency overcoming me. "That man in that balloon stole my milk. We're lost in the past, with jungles and pirates and volcanoes. Now I'll never get home. My children will never have breakfast. We are doomed to float forever through the dusty air of the past in a hot air balloon." "It is not a balloon," said Professor Steg. "It is a floaty ball person carrier. What nonsense you do talk. Now I think that should do the trick." He finished attaching the emerald to the box, using string mostly, and also sticky tape, and he pushed the red button. "Where are we going?" I asked. It seemed like the sun was zooming across the sky, as if nights were following days in a flickering strobe. "The far, far future," said Professor Steg. The machine stopped. We were hanging in the air above a grassy plain with a very small gray mountain beneath us. "There," said Professor Steg. "It is now an extinct volcano. But look!" On the side of the extinct volcano was carved the face of Splod, still recognizable even though it was much eroded by time and weather, and in the single eye was a huge green emerald, a perfect twin to the one that we had attached to the time machine. "Right," said Professor Steg. "Grab me that special shiny greeny stone." I went over to the side of the gondola and down the rope ladder. I pulled the emerald out of the eye socket. Below me, on the plain, a number of brightly colored ponies were gathered, and when I picked up the emerald, one of them shouted up at me, "You must be the man without the milk. We've heard about you in our tales." "Why are you a pink pony with a pale blue star on the side?" I asked. "I know," said the pony with a sigh. "It's what everybody's wearing these days. Pale blue stars are so last year." Professor Stegg leaned over the side of the balloon's basket. "Hurry up," he called. "If the volcano is going to go off, it will do it any moment." The volcano made a noise like a huge burp, and in the middle of it collapsed into itself. "We thought it would do that," said a green pony with a sparkly mane. "There was a prophecy, I suppose," I said. "No, we're just very clever," all the ponies nodded. They were very clever ponies. "I am so glad they were ponies," said my sister. There's an illustration of the ponies she was hoping for. I got back into the balloon basket. Professor Stegg unhooked the first emerald from his time machine and replaced it with the one that I had just taken from the weathered face of Splod in the future. "Do not, whatever else you might do," said the professor, "touch those stones together." "Why not?" "Because according to my calculations, if the same object from two different times touches itself, one of the two things will happen. Either the universe will cease to exist, or three remarkable dwarves will dance through the streets with flower pots on their heads." "That sounds astonishingly specific," I said. "I know, but it is science, and it is much more probable that the universe will end." "I thought it would be," I said. "You look so sad," Professor Stegg told me. "I am. It's the milk. My children are breakfastless." "The milk," said Professor Stegg. "Of course." And with that, Professor Stegg pressed the red button with his heavily armored tail. There was a zoom and a thorp and a thang, and we were hurtling through the cosmic void. And then it was dark, very dark. "Oops," said Professor Stegg. "Overshot a little. Only by a week, though. Hold on." Professor Stegg leaned over the side of the basket. "Excuse me?" he said. "Is there anyone around?" "Only me," said a very surprised-sounding voice from below us. "The priest of Splod. Who is that up in the sky? Is it a bird? You do not sound like a bird." "I am not a bird," said Professor Stegg. "I am a marvelous yet mysterious and prophetic voice, telling you a mighty prophecy. So mighty that, very mighty indeed. Listen. When a huge and good-looking spiny-backed individual, monster, I told him. The prophecy said monster. Accompanied by a scrawny human being of revolting appearance, said Professor Stegg. That was not necessary. Lands in a floaty ball person carrier, you must not sacrifice them. You must instead take them to the volcano and give them the Eye of Splod, and this shall be the way that you shall know them. The human being will hold up the milk. Is that the prophecy? Said the voice. Yes. Is there anything about crops in it? I'm afraid not. Oh well, thank you anyway, prophetic and mysterious voices from the air. I pressed the red button. Daylight. We were in the middle of a very familiar volcanic eruption. Quickly, I said, give me the emerald. A little way away, I could see a balloon being blown through the sky, while fire and ash were swept around it by the wind. I could see me in the balloon, standing next to the Professor Stegg with my mouth open. I looked miserable. Professor Stegg, my Professor Stegg, gave me the emerald. I raced down the rope ladder and placed the emerald back into the base's eye. Then, as the volcano stopped erupting, I looked around for the milk. I knew it had landed on the Splod's head when it fell. Fortunately, the milk had fallen into a small drift of volcanic ash and was unharmed. I picked it up, brushed it off, and started back up the balloon ladder. Professor Stegg pressed the button. The sky went dark. There they are in the volcano, or not the volcano, the balloon. And it just went all dark. We were floating above a landscape of ominous towers and disquieting castles. It was not a friendly place. Bats flew across the sky in huge flocks, crowding out the waning moon. I don't like this place, I told the professor. I don't see why not, he said. It looks as if it would be very nice when the sun comes up. There was a loud flute, and where the bats had been fluttering, several pallid people were now standing. The man in front had a very bald head. They all had sharp teeth. Here's an illustration. Once again, crazy looking moon up there. "We are vampires," they said. "What is this? Who are you? Answer us, or we will bisect you." "I am Professor Steg," boomed the Stegosaurus. "This is my assistant. We are on an important mission. I am trying to get back to the present. My assistant is trying to get home to the future for breakfast." At the word breakfast, all the vampires looked very excited. "We have not had our breakfast," they told us. "We normally have wiggly worms with orange juice on them. Orange juice makes worms even wigglier, like wandering spaghetti. But if we cannot eat worms, we will eat assistant or even ghost professor." Oh my goodness, they are creepy looking vampires with a W instead of vampires. That's what they're called. Creepy. One of the vampires took out a fork and looked me up and down in a hungry sort of way. The baldest, most bulging-eyed, rattiest of the vampires said, "What is that box?" "It is my finest invention," began Professor Steg proudly, but I interrupted. "It's to keep sandwiches in," I said. "Sandwiches," said the vampire. "Sandwiches," I said, with as much certainty as I could muster. "We thought it was a time machine," said the head vampire with a sly, sharp smile, "and we could use it to invade the world." "Definitely sandwiches," I told him. "What happens if I press this button, then?" asked a lady vampire. She had long black hair that covered most of her face and peered out at the world with one suspicious eye. She pressed the button. We went forward 6 hours in time. "See," said the professor happily, "all this place needs to brighten it up is a little bit of sunshine." The head vampire said, "What?" and dissolved into a cloud of oily black smoke. So did all of his friends. "Yes," I said, "it is a nice place here after all, in the daylight." The professor tinkered with the jewels and the string and the balloon and the buttons. Then he said, "I think I've got it properly fine-tuned now. This next press should bring you back to your own time, place, and breakfast." But before the tip of his tail could touch the button, a voice said, "I'll explain later. Fate of the world at stake." A hand grabbed, and the milk, which I had carried safely for so long, was gone. I turned in time to catch a glimpse of a fine-looking gentleman with his back to me, holding my milk, and then the hole in space through which he had reached was closed. "My milk!" "He said he'll explain later," said the professor. I'd be inclined to believe him. All right, so I think that's a good spot to stop. And so we will continue next week with the next section of Fortunately the Milk. We might actually go ahead and finish the book, I think, next Friday, so stay tuned for that, and have a good weekend.